Ophir, the biblical land of gold. Men have sought it from India to Arabia, but some believe its legacy lingers on in the treasure chambers of the kings of Africa. It is said that in the heart of Africa there lies a realm of great riches. It is said that here will be found the treasures of ancient times, the mythic wealth of the Queen of Saba, the gold of King Solomon's mines. That is the legend. And many of those who believe the legend go even further. They say that the people in the core of Africa live on sacred ground. For Ophir, the biblical home of all riches, was situated, they believe, there, where we now find Zimbabwe on the map. Zimbabwe. The name means big house of stone. The stones of the Matobo Hills are dignified, majestic testaments to eternity. They are the dwelling places of the spirits of the ancestors. The heart of the country beats here in the Matobo Hills. For here, the history of Zimbabwe was played out. The history of a king and his treasure. Not the mythic gold of Ophir, but a real treasure. A treasure that disappeared in the middle of a bloody war just 100 years ago. The story begins in a cleft of rock on the Matobo Hills, where the bones of Mzili Kazi, the first king of the Ndebele, are tucked away. Mzili Kazi was a brilliant politician who brought fame and respect to his people. Yet he has gone down in history not so much as a leader, but as the father of the man who is said to have accumulated one of the great fortunes of Africa. King Lobengula, a king who disappeared without a trace, along with his riches. Over 100 years have gone by since Lobengula vanished into thin air. His descendants, the Ndebele people, still live in the south of Zimbabwe. In their songs and dances, their faith and history live on. They sing about the spirits, about the harvest and the rain, and sometimes they sing about the king who disappeared with his gold, his diamonds, and his ivory. In the children's stories and the folk songs, the Ndebele sing, "Over Shangani River he disappeared, and that is where the treasure is buried." The Ndebele seek neither Lobengula's grave nor his gold. For them, both have long since found their place in the world beyond this one. But we are setting out to reconstruct Lobengula's last journey, to follow the path of the king and his treasure. Somewhere in Zimbabwe, Lobengula's riches must be concealed, if it is not all a legend. Yet there are many questions to be answered. How did Lobengula come by this great wealth? Why did he flee with it? And where does it lie hidden in these hills? On the trail of the king and his treasure, our first stop is Bulawayo. With 500,000 inhabitants, the second largest city in Zimbabwe, Bulawayo was already a large capital in Lobengula's time. Today, it is packed with modern buildings, trucks, and cars. But even 100 years ago, the grass huts of some 17,000 inhabitants stood here. In the town's historical archives, we search for documents which might explain how Lobengula could have gained possession of gold and diamonds and ivory. For Lobengula inherited a young, poor kingdom. His father was the first ruler of the Matabele nation. The records show that Lobengula's father, Mzilikazi, did not come from present-day Zimbabwe. He didn't settle here with his tribe until 1838, after fleeing from Zululand. For Mzilikazi was the leader of a clan which had risen up unsuccessfully against the leader Shaka Zulu. When Mzilikazi arrived in Matabele with his people, he encountered other tribes who were living there. But he soon dominated them, and by the 1860s, he claimed that his power extended over the entire Matabele land. Mzilikazi's policy of conquest, however, cost a fortune. So when Lobengula came to the throne in 1870, he inherited a kingdom that was large, but almost bankrupt. The new king had to do something if his nation was to survive. So Lobengula decided to deal with the white traders, hunters, and merchants who were pouring into Africa. Holding court in front of his oxen wagon, the Ndebele king granted hunting and mining concessions in his country. It was the golden age of the elephant. This was Lobengula's ruling title and emblem. In these years, he acquired a fortune in ivory, diamonds, and gold. Until in 1888, he was hoodwinked by the British South African Company of the colonialist Cecil Rhodes. When King Lobengula placed his elephant seal on the Rudd concession, he didn't realize it, but he had sold his nation. In rummaging through the old archives, we get to know author and historian Lisa Condor, who has been researching Lobengula's story for years.
They were not completely straight with Lobengula. Lobengula thought that the white man would be here for a short time and then he would go. That's the whole idea. They mustn't settle and then they mustn't come in droves. And this is not what Cecil Rhodes wanted. He wanted to colonize.
The proud days of the Matabele nation were numbered. For with the prospectors of the British South African Company came British soldiers, soldiers with rifles. The Ndebele warriors had only spears. The outcome of any conflict was a foregone conclusion. Cecil Rhodes was simply waiting for an opportunity to legitimize the attack on Lobengula's nation. And in 1893, he got that opportunity. Under the pretense of having to defend a small tribe from the Ndebele warriors, Rhodes's soldiers invaded Lobengula's kingdom. Swiftly, they advanced to Bulawayo, Lobengula's seat of power. The battle was quick and bloody. Lobengula's warriors were no match for the English. The Union Jack soon went up on Matabele land. But Lobengula held one last surprise for Rhodes's soldiers. For as they advanced on his royal residence, they discovered that he had ordered it burned to the ground. And the king himself had simply disappeared into thin air. Since the signing of the Rudd concession, Lobengula had known that the peace might be treacherous. The king's tragedy was that he could see no way out for his people. Lobengula didn't want war. Rhodes, however, forced him to act. Lobengula acted, but not as the white men envisaged. He had time to plan his last days in power, and he knew that the invaders lusted for one thing above all, his gold. This they would not have, for the king had prepared a hiding place.
It was ferried out about 2 years before his demise. He knew he was on the way out, and he knew that he'd had his ships, and so he arranged for his valuables to be taken out, and then the people who knew about the place where it was buried, he had them killed, which is sort of fairly normal standard procedure.
Brutal customs in a brutal age. Yet Lobengula was no bloodthirsty dictator. He was a religious man, and so he withdrew to the spiritual sites scattered throughout the Matabele realm, places no white men knew. The old ruins, the secret retreats, these became Lobengula's haunts as he hid and pondered. Here the king was safe from the white men. He was able to think in peace about the future of his nation. For Lobengula had a difficult decision to make. If he went, his people would have no leader. But what would happen if he stayed and fought back? That way led to sheer destruction. So how could he preserve his nation? The king saw no alternatives. What he wanted, above all, was to leave his people one thing, something that would be reflected 100 years later in the faces and the lives of the Ndebele descendants. He wanted to give his people their dignity, a hope for the future. It was a decision to be made in the name of children yet to be born. For if the king had chosen to fight to the last man, the Ndebele might not have survived, might not even exist today. Before Lobengula made such a monumental decision, he consulted his medicine men. Even today, the medicine men still enjoy the same esteem in the eyes of the Ndebele as they did 100 years ago in the court of King Lobengula. As long as there are medicine men, then the Ndebele tribe will continue to exist. For in their answers to the questions they are asked, the medicine men always consider the well-being of the entire tribe. Thus, they decided 100 years ago for the less heroic, but in the long run, more sensible solution. The king should go. His people should stay and survive. But where should Lobengula's last journey take him?
I think he was heading towards the Zambezi after his defeat. He had a bit of gold on him. I think he was heading towards the Zambezi and eventually to where his treasure was buried. He was definitely heading in a northerly direction. And his father before him had tried to cross the Zambezi as well. So there was this attraction to get away from, particularly the white man here, to get away from his defeat, to open up, go into new territory.
We are following the last traces of Lobengula's trail before it faded into obscurity. On his last journey northwards, heading into the wilderness, he traveled from the Shangani River towards the Zambezi River, accompanied only by a chosen few, his medicine men and his best warriors. At the Shangani River, he left behind everything that had belonged to his life up to then. Only one more time would he intervene in the world of the white man. We are heading to the site of Lobengula's last rendezvous with history. Not far from here, his escort surprised a patrol of British soldiers who were pursuing them across the Shangani. The place where Lobengula's warriors attacked the British patrol, killing every single man, has gone down in history. A monument was erected on the site to the memory of brave men. The last stand of Major Alan Wilson was glorified in drawings and newspaper accounts, and the legend of the Shangani Patrol was born. But in the history books of white Africa, no one mentions that the Ndebele warriors were simply trying to defend their country and their king. After this last battle, Lobengula's trail finally disappears. We travel in the direction of the Zambezi River, but there are no more traces of Lobengula's actual route. All we know is that the last king of the Ndebele died on this journey. Lobengula was sick in spirit. For his last resting place, he preferred the wilds of Africa to the company of the white man. He braved the dangers of nature so that he could end his life outside Cecil Rhodes's grasp. In search of Lobengula's trail, we travel through areas where time seems to have passed without leaving a trace. We can only imagine that in the moment of his death, Lobengula wanted to be close to the old Africa, to the spirit of an ancient land. Yet a veil of mystery still hovers over Lobengula's last days, for few clues remain.
Well, this is one of the wonderful things about the mystery. Nobody actually knows. There's been no proper scientific investigation. What has been suggested is he died of smallpox. It was a rainy season when he was traveling. He may have died of smallpox, or he may have committed suicide.
Lobengula left this world without ever relinquishing his secrets. The location of his deathbed, his riches, they remain a mystery. Yet, ironically, the search for treasure in present-day Zimbabwe does not come up empty. For here, gold is being discovered every week. Scientists estimate that great molten masses of granite, in existence some 3 billion years, pushed up huge deposits of gold through the cracks of the earth, creating a treasure trove. Not Lobengula's treasure, one more ancient than that.
So here we are in what we would call King Solomon's Orpheus land, where there's a lot of gold, but which is not being properly exploited by the people. In this river, we can talk about 40 to 50,000 along the river. That is from where it starts to where it goes into another river. Yes, about 40,000. And countrywide, we have about 300,000, all digging illegally along the rivers. Yes.
These people are not looking for nuggets. They are collecting the gold dust, which is to be found in the earth. For this, they dig holes, tens of thousands of holes, into which the river water flows. In the river itself, the water is steadily decreasing. For the animals who come here to drink, the holes become deadly traps. The legend of Ophir is becoming a nightmare for nature.
Yes, it was the land of Lobengula where he had a lot of mines and a lot of treasures. But now the way people are working on the rivers can no longer justify exploiting that treasure in that manner. Can no longer justify that at all.
Godfrey Morange is in charge of a special state development project, a project that shows how, with no modern technology, only a simple, well-conceived mining method, Ophir's golden veins can be opened without leaving any wounds in the African wilderness. Instead of digging holes, Morange's miners work large open surfaces, which are later filled up with earth again. Men and women do the same work for the same pay. Life with gold has a long tradition in Matabele land. Until now, only a few have actually become rich. But the mining project run by Godfrey Morange is a model case that shows how gold could indeed bring good fortune to more people in Zimbabwe by paying a salary and ensuring their daily existence. When the filter apparatus is working, then the mining method really pays off. At the end of the line, gold dust regularly remains in the pan. The workers pool their finds. Each one is thus assured a steady monthly income. Yeah. 300 grams of gold dust are gleaming in the pan, the result of a working week. $3,350 worth to be split among the workers. Day by day here in Zimbabwe, a prosaic treasure is being reaped. But the hunt for the great fortunes of Lobengula and Ophir and King Solomon's mines, they go on. If the myths have any truth, the answers must lie here in the region between the Limpopo, Shangani, and Zambezi, where veins of gold flow like meandering rivers through the soil. In such a land where the earth glows with gold, it is no surprise that reality and legend seem to overlap, and that the fables grow as tall as the mountains. Somewhere in this treacherous green wilderness, in one of the many caves, in one of the numerous ravines, Lobengula's treasure is said to be hidden. One story tells us that Lobengula's bones were taken across the thundering waters and secretly put into the same cleft of rock which contains his father Mzilikazi's remains. 100 years later, who can say where the truth and the treasure actually lies?
Myself, I think that it probably does exist because there was just so much of it in the form of sovereigns and diamonds, and obviously ivory, and it would have been very difficult for him to have squandered it, as some people have suggested, that therefore it doesn't exist anymore, it's been diluted. So yes, I do believe it still exists.
The hiding place of the treasure. This was and still is Lobengula's last triumph over Cecil Rhodes and his successors. Africa retained her treasures. Did Lobengula ever complete his journey to the Zambezi River? Did he ever make it to Victoria Falls, the largest waterfall on Earth? And what happened to his fortune and his remains? No one can say for sure. For here, on this journey to the other end of the rainbow, the facts run out. And here, it is the legends that must have the last word. In the great mythic chant of Africa's past, the tale of Lobengula has, over the decades, blended with the myth of Ophir. For it is finally the same mystery that resonates in both. And as long as there are still treasures to be discovered, Africa will pass on again and again the story of that elusive fortune, here in the Golden Land.